Good afternoon and welcome. Absolutely delighted to have with us today Tim Albright, the founder of AVNation. Tim, welcome. You've come all the way from North America. I know this is your second ever ISE. Tell us a little bit about your first ISE and how it compares to this one, perhaps.
So our first ISE was an interesting one. We had never come across to this show. It was obviously our first one. As a media company that covers primarily the North American market and the integrators in that market, ISE had gotten to the point where it was necessary to cover. Not only had it in numbers, like attendees, but the amount of product releases, the innovations that were happening here, it was necessary for our audience to come to it. So we did something a little unconventional. We did a Kickstarter, raised enough money to make it over here with four of us. Did an Airbnb. It was very, new age type hipster thing to do, but we did Airbnb. And it was a great experience, it really was. Everybody from the ISE team, Steph and Mr. Blackman, all the way through Infocom and Cedia, they were all great to work with. The show itself was phenomenal. It was an experience just walking on the show floor and seeing the scope of this show. Having come only to Infocom and the Cedia shows, the sheer size, the square footage of this show was breathtaking.
So now it's a regular on your little list of AVNation stuff. We'll cover that in a little bit and the things you do every week. So it's a regular. You're here for the second year. You've brought a few more people, I think, this year. And what's the biggest impression you had? What have you seen that was maybe slightly different? Because you've had an Infocom in between as well. You had Infocom in Orlando. What has that affected what you've seen this year, you think, from the first year?
I think so. You look at Infocom now a little differently, right? It is squarely in that pro, commercial space when it comes to the AV technology. You do have a couple of releases that happen there as well. But this is a good 7 months after Infocom. Companies have had the chance to R&D certain things, maybe fine-tune some things that they had started to release or started to talk about in Infocom, and now they're ready to fully release it. There's a microphone manufacturer who was quietly showing something at Infocom, very, sign the NDA type thing, and now they're fully showing it here. Here it is in all its glory. So they've had time to tweak it and make some revisions to it. And I think you're going to find more and more of that, where at one show or the other, they'll start quietly, showing a handful of trusted integrators and trusted partners. And then between the shows, that gives them time to tweak, that gives them time to assess what their feedback they're getting from folks is, and then release it in full at the next show.
It's an interesting insight. So we'll probably see lots of whisper suites and behind closed door stuff in June, and the fully released. Now, one of the things we love about what you do is that you take the things that you do on a weekly basis, your podcast, your AV Week podcast, and you bring them to these shows. So tell us a little bit about how that weekly stuff fits into the shows that you've done this week, because you've been on air, I think, 2 or 3 times a day sometimes.
Yes, sir.
For the whole 4 days.
So what we do is, our weekly show is called AV Week. We also have a new weekly one called Resi Week, which is the residential version of AV Week. And so this week at ISE, we've taken those shows and produced live to tape episodes of those. Actually, AV Week will have you on, we'll have a number of other integrators as well as other press, just to see what they're doing and what they've seen. The show is big. I didn't see everything, right? You didn't see everything. So you get other folks who have, and they have different interests and they have a different story to tell. In addition to that, we did a number of live internet broadcasts, right? Where we would, every day at the end of the show, including today, 15 minutes before the show stops, we do a live internet broadcast where we stream it out live to our audience, to anybody with an internet connection. They can see kind of what we have going on, and it's a 10 to 15 minute broadcast where they can get a short little synopsis of the things that we've seen.
That's pretty unique, I think, for this industry, for a way of covering things. It's changing the way journalism works. I mean, you and I have talked about that before. So your regular Friday AV Week show is going to go out live this afternoon from ISE.
From ISE, yes.
Wow, fantastic. And In terms of other events that you cover, you mentioned CEDIA.
Yes.
That's big in your space. That's a North American show that is really, really important to your audience.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's becoming more and more. CEDIA is, if you look at it from the numbers, CEDIA is not as well attended as InfoCommons, right? Certainly not as attended as ISE. But CEDIA is half owner of ISE, right? So the residential space is important, not only to our audience, but also to the market. You've got a lot of innovation happening there. The buzzword of IoT is fully in that space, right? Not only that, but you have security concerns with everything being on the network. So you have a number of network switch manufacturers who are in that space, and they're doing a phenomenal job of securing everything down. And honestly, there are some things that the commercial folks could learn from some of those people.
That's
so,
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm glad you raised that. We had a representative from Google on the show earlier on. He was primarily talking about video conferencing and the Chromebox stuff. But he was saying that consumerization is one of the most important things, whereas you as a techie are quite used to putting in a 10-digit PIN code for audio conferencing and pressing the pound sign. We don't know what the pound sign is, it's different to your hash sign. But consumers are used to one click.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some overlap, and there's going to be some learnings from those things. So again, you're uniquely placed, I think, to bring those things together and highlight those issues.
I think
So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm old enough though to remember what the pound sign is, unfortunately. Yep.
So what have you seen this week then? Obviously, I had a conversation earlier on with another journalist who covers lots of sectors. We focus on digital signage. It's easy. We go to Digital Signage Hall 8.
Yeah.
We see the big screen manufacturers, NEC, we've seen the LED, and that's it. You cover so many different things. So give us a snippet and maybe the different vertical sectors that you've seen trending here at the show.
So the biggest takeaway that I'm taking from this one is service, right? A number of manufacturers now are moving into that whole service sector, where they're offering services to the integrator, and they're offering services to the integrator to resell to their end users, right? Whether that's the ability to monitor their systems or troubleshoot remotely, things of that nature. And that does get into the security, right? That gets into the networking and stuff like that. Then you've got folks that are working on a high-speed digital transportation of video. A 4 gig, a 4 gig or 4K uncompressed is 17 gigs roughly. There are folks that are working on getting that under 10 gigs, and a couple of them say they've done it. I've not seen it personally, but according to their specs, they've got it. And so those are two things right now, because as great display manufacturers like NEC are moving to 4K and even 8K, we've got to get that video somewhere, somehow, right? And folks have kind of gotten used to the one cable. They're going to want that one cable regardless of what
we've interviewed a couple of market researchers, FutureSource, Mako, and a few others, and they all said that we had lessons to learn from the broadcast industry about compression, saying that compression is not something that's typically been discussed here. The other thing that they talked about is the fact that in the broadcast industry, IT is really well in bed with the broadcast industry, because you go to NAB or you go to IBC here in Amsterdam, and there's server farms and there's gigabyte arrays and there's all IT stuff, which, we had an opening panel on the Monday night, I don't know if you went to, about AV and IT. There's an AV and IT workshop again this afternoon. It seems that AV has still got a lot to learn about IP.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, it was, so here's the thing, the people have been talking about convergence for 12, 14 years now, and I wish they'd stop, because convergence has happened. AV is a part of IT, right? It really is. The more we let the network guys educate us as AV, traditional AV folks, I think the better our job is going to be, right? We're going to do our job better, because they know this stuff. They know networking, they know security, they know layers and stuff like that. We know screens, we know resolutions. We know how far away you need to be to get the optimal viewing distance. So why don't we learn from each other, right? It's not a either or, it's a together you can make the whole thing happen.
That's good. Now, you may not have had time to digest the whole week with the 4 days and all the people, so it may not be a topic of conversation for this afternoon's AV Week, but next Friday, do you think there's a message you'll go back to your audience with about what you've done and what you've experienced in these 4 days? Is there one giveaway or takeaway that you would give them?
The world is getting smaller, and get used to it. And it's exciting. I think you and I have talked about this before. This show, to me, is the epitome of the AV world. because here we get to talk to folks who are not are homogeneous, right? We are not, all one old white guy, right? Who happens to be from the Midwest. And I love that because you have a different experience and you have a different take on this industry than I do. And the gentleman I met from this afternoon from India, who's a programmer, and he showed me one of the most unique touch panels I've ever seen in my life. And you're not going to find that, anyplace else. And so the experience of sharing with each other our shared knowledge and learning from each other, I think, is a fascinating thing.
So the one thing you'd probably encourage your listeners to attend.
Absolutely.
2017.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether they're manufacturers, I think if you're a manufacturer and you're not at ISE, I think you're making a mistake. I really do. From an integration standpoint, if you're looking at what the next thing is and you need to know what the next thing is before June, right? Because June is when InfoComm is, then you need to come. Yeah.
Tim,
yes.
Thank you very much indeed.